Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so pumped you're here because today we are taking a deep dive into the hidden architecture of character psychology. We're going to unpack that absolutely fascinating relationship between a character's past and their present limitations. We'll be focusing right in on the critical wound behind Fatal Flaws and how that dynamic literally builds the stories we love. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever watched a gripping narrative and just found yourself asking, what makes a character the architect of their own misery? Like, why do capable, super intelligent protagonists keep making the exact same destructive choices or hitting the exact same emotional walls? Well, today we are going to decode the blueprint behind that exact phenomenon.
Section 1, Anatomy of a Flaw, Character Limitations.
So in classical storytelling, this concept is often called Hamartia, or, the Achilles heel. It's that weakness existing inside an otherwise completely capable character. It is the chink in the armor. And it's really vital to understand here that a fatal flaw isn't just about a character being kind of clumsy, or maybe bad at a specific skill. No, it is a highly specific, totally exploitable vulnerability. It's the one place where they're exposed to an enemy who knows exactly where to press, or honestly, they're vulnerable to themselves because they might not even see this blind spot at all yet.
And here's why that vulnerability is a real game changer. It sits in direct tension with survival. This weakness stands squarely in the way of what the character needs to do to succeed, or what they absolutely must do to become who the story is asking them to become. Think of it structurally, right? It's like a massive crack in a building's foundation. It's not just some abstract idea floating around. It carries actual physical, structural weight within the narrative. Section 2, the load-bearing weakness. Structural obstacles. Now, there is a massive difference between what a writer might think is a flaw and what actually works on the page. Think of a decoration flaw like giving a bad answer in a job interview. I just cared too much. A weakness that never really gets tested, never gets pressed on by the plot, and never actually costs the character anything, that's just decoration. A true fatal flaw is load-bearing. The story literally could not work without it. Take the movie Jaws, for example. The protagonist's intense fear of water isn't merely a quirky character trait or a slight inconvenience. It is the precise, load-bearing obstacle standing right between him and the massive shark he has to kill. Section 3, the wound behind the flaw. The hidden architecture. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we pivot to that hidden architecture, the past event that actually creates the fatal flaw. Let's track how these two elements interact chronologically. In the past, usually way before the story even starts, the wound occurs, and it leaves a mark on the character. Then, fast forward to the present day of the narrative, and the flaw shows up in their behavior, their choices, and their blind spots. The wound is the historical event, right? While the flaw is its active, living, consequential presence in the character's everyday life. His flaw is the scar of his wound. I kind of want to let that powerful quote from our source material sit with you for a second. The wound and the flaw, they aren't the exact same thing, but they are completely inseparable forces. One naturally produces the other. The character's present-day weakness is, quite literally, the emotional scar tissue left behind by their past trauma. And this dynamic is exactly what separates a totally flat character from a psychologically real one. A flat character is, just a collection of assigned qualities. A writer just decides, okay, they're brave, or stubborn, or kind, and that's the whole shebang. But a real, three-dimensional character has a deeply rooted history that explains exactly why they are the way they are. Their flaw isn't just pulled out of thin air. It grows directly, logically, from their personal history. Let's actually look at how this plays out in practice by neutrally mapping out some examples from our source material. In Jaws, the wound is a traumatic childhood incident involving water. That's the past trauma. The resulting flaw in the present, a crippling fear that is active and consequential every single time he stands at the shore. It literally stops him from doing his job, creating this paralyzing barrier that protects him from the water, sure, but endangers everyone around him. Or look at the film In the Heat of the Night. The detective, Virgil Tibbs, carries a deep prejudice against white people. Why? Well, not because he's a lesser man, but because the historical wound of racial suppression has taught him, with painful accuracy, that this is just how the world works. His flaw limits his ability to trust, clouding his otherwise brilliant investigative instincts. The story is going to force him to examine it, but that flaw is deeply, firmly grounded in his own lived history. So the crucial point is that when you truly understand a character's historical wound, their resulting behavioral limitations don't just make sense. The flaw feels entirely inevitable.
It is no longer some arbitrary weakness slapped on by the author. It's an understandable, deeply human defense mechanism born directly from experience.
Section 4. The site of transformation. The narrative climax. Let's move to and see how this builds chronologically across a character's whole journey. Step 1. The wound occurs in the past, leaving its mark. Step 2. Throughout the story, the flaw acts as a barrier, just constantly preventing the character from taking necessary action. And finally, Step 3. The climax. Because the flaw arises directly from the wound, overcoming that flaw means the character must finally reckon with the wound itself. Like, the protagonist of Jaws simply cannot kill the shark without getting into the water. Virgil Tibbs cannot solve his case or become who he needs to be without confronting a prejudice he has every historical reason to hold.
You know, the absolute beauty of a great story is that it doesn't ask its characters to simply magically stop being afraid, or to just suddenly drop their guard out of nowhere. Instead, it asks them to make a monumental choice, to act in spite of the wound. It forces them to do the exact thing the flaw has always prevented them from doing. That choice is the climax. Actually, scratch that. That choice is what the entire story was engineered for from the very first frame.
I want to leave you with this provocative question to take into your next movie-watching experience. When the hero is facing their ultimate challenge, look closely and ask yourself, are they fighting the villain, or are they actually fighting their wound? Understanding this dynamic entirely transforms how we consume stories. It shows us the true hidden architecture behind character growth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I will see you next time.